Hey guys, welcome back to the city of Yarnum. Things are really heating up now. We're getting towards the end of our journey and everything's going to get a lot tougher. The bosses are going to get tougher. So you're going to find me, getting my ass kicked a lot basically. So today we're going to head into the Nightmare of Mensis. First into the Nightmare Lecture Hall and then straight into the main part of the Mensis area. And then before we actually face off with Micolash, the host of the Nightmare. So, what am I going to talk about today? I really want to talk a lot about the nightmare realms themselves, or the dreamlands, whatever you want to call them, and how they're actually put together and the nature of those areas. First of all, let's talk about which areas in the game constitute the nightmare, or the dreamlands. You've got two main sets. First of all, the areas that are associated with Mensis. That's the lecture building, where we're in now. The Nightmare Frontier, and we were there a few episodes ago, and the Nightmare of Mensis. They're all associated with Mensis for me for various reasons, but the most important fact we need to understand is that they're all connected. It's pretty much, these are the most closely related areas that you can actually walk from one to another. You can walk straight from the lecture building to the Nightmare Frontier or to the Nightmare of Mensis. The second set of areas in the main game aren't connected, but they're worth mentioning. First, the Hunter's Dream and the Moonside Lake. Now, what I want to talk about quickly is the fact that just because the Hunter's Dream is called a dream, that doesn't mean it's necessarily a good thing or a positive place. I mentioned before in another video that the Hunter's Dream could just be an allusion to hell or purgatory. So just because it's called a dream, it's not necessarily a good place. And, the fact that the areas run by Mensis, the Nightmare Frontier and the Nightmare of Mensis, are called nightmares, that doesn't necessarily mean, in my mind at least, that they're, very negative areas. They're pretty messed up places, when you get there, but technically so is the Hunter's Dream. But it's just a play on words, and really they're pretty much all the same thing. They're all, constitute the dreamlands in this world, and they're all basically inhabited by really strange creatures, including the great ones. So how are the nightmares created? Where do they come from? Now, if we read the description of the third chord we get from the abandoned workshop, it states that the third umbilical cord precipitated the encounter with the pale moon, which beckoned the hunters and conceived the hunter's dream. This showed that you can use a third chord to actually make contact with the great ones, to actually, conceive a dream or, a nightmare realm. So it seems to me what happened in that case was Gurman and probably Lawrence and his so-called associates got together and, concocted a ritual to basically draw in the great one known as the moon presence, who we're going to meet at the end of this run, and actually conceive the dream itself. Now if you read another chord that you get from Murga's wet nurse when you kill her, it states that this chord granted Mensis audience with Murgo, but resulted in the stillbirth of their brains. So again, in this case, we see that the third chord itself is used by Mensis to actually conceive another dream, which obviously is the Nightmare of Mensis, and basically so that they can actually converse with Murgo and probably Odin as well. And if you read the third chord you get from Ariana's child, it states, "To think it was corrupted blood that began this eldritch liaison." So from all this we know that pretty much you need third chords in order to make contact with the great ones, and when you make contact you do so by entering this realm of the nightmare or the dreams. Now of course there are other rituals involved in this process. We don't know what they are exactly, but the point is that you need the chord to actually do it. And it's also worth knowing that you actually need a human being to actually interact with the great ones. What do I mean by that? Now, if you read the description of the moon rune, it states, "The great ones that inhabit the nightmare are sympathetic in spirit and often answer when called upon." Now, that line, sympathetic in spirit, is really important because it implies that you actually have to call them. It's actually something you do. It's not that you just mix together a bunch of ingredients, including a third chord, in a beaker, and then suddenly the great ones will appear. You actually have to call them. And I think there's a few characters. There's 3 characters that really stand out. That basically I think can fit this role. The first one and the most obvious one is Gehrman, who basically is managing the hunter's dream, and it's likely that he and Lawrence, like I said, basically beckoned the moon presence. The second one, who we're going to meet later today, is Micolash, who obviously beckoned I suppose Murgo or Murgo's wetness or Odin for the Nightmare of Mensis. And finally you've got Maria, who not a lot of people realize, I don't think, at least it's not a fact, this is something that I'm speculating about, but I think she was probably the one that actually beckoned the hunter's nightmare, because I think that actually let's get into that when we get to the DLC, if we get to the DLC. But I believe that she was the custodian for the hunter's nightmare, because she's protecting the Great One, Cos, or at least Cos's body, and her unborn, orphan child. But like I said, these people all become custodians of their respective nightmares or dreams, and that's really important because it basically binds them to these places, whether they like it or not. Now, what are the nightmare realms exactly? We've talked about how they've been created, but what are they? Now, basically, if you want to define them in a nutshell, they're, in my opinion, a plane of existence where a human being can interact with a Great One. You can't usually, in most cases, interact with Great Ones in the waking world. If in Yharnam itself, you see the lesser amygdalas and you see Ebritas, and you can't see the lesser amygdalas until either the veil of the world is lifted by killing Rom, or unless your insight is over 40. So it requires a certain amount of rituals to actually see them. Obviously Ebritas you can see no matter what, but then again we only see her after we've defeated Rom anyway, so I don't know if those two things are related. I don't think they are though. But the point is that these Great Ones we can actually see in the waking world and interact with them, but all the other Great Ones that we really know about you only either encounter in the nightmare or dreaming lands, or you never really see. For example, at the end of the game you actually meet the moon presence, and we meet Murgo's wetness, who's obviously a Great One in the Nightmare of Mensis. Odin we never meet, but that's actually a slightly different issue, which I can discuss maybe later on, but we never actually meet him. But the point I'm trying to make is that for us to actually make contact with the Great Ones, we really can only properly interact with them via these realms that are conceived. How are they conceived exactly beyond the rituals, I don't really know. But I think what's important is that what I've noticed about them is basically that I don't think that the nightmares that have been created are really necessarily representative of the world of the Great Ones. If we look at the different nightmares, take them one by one, you've got the Hunter's Dream, which basically is a direct copy of the Hunter's Workshop, the old Hunter's Workshop in Yharnam. The Moonside Lake is just looks just like a normal lake with with no obviously end. And Lecture Building is obviously taken from Yharnam itself. The Nightmare Frontier, I'm sure, is the frontier areas of Yharnam, and the Nightmare of Mensis is most certainly going to be a copy of some part of Yahagul. So why do these nightmare realms look like the waking world, except very, very strange twisted versions of them? I think that's done intentionally by whatever creates the nightmare realms. I think obviously the Great Ones, to actually accommodate human beings, because they've listened to us at this point. Whenever the rituals happen, they've drawn us in and they've given us a chance to commune with them. But obviously we can't just, I don't think, if you go back to the work of H.P. Lovecraft, he often talked about how, his characters often went mad just by looking at the realms of the eldritch beings, of the old ones, of the great ones, or whatever you want to call them. The geometry was very strange. It was always described as non-Euclidean. So it's as if the human mind couldn't process what it was actually, what it was looking at. They couldn't understand the nature of these worlds and the architecture of the beings that resided in them. So this is an attempt, creating the Hunter's Dream to look like the old abandoned workshop, making copies of, Yahagul or whatever on the Nightmare Lecture Hall is an attempt by the Great Ones to create a realm that we can actually function in, so that we can interact with them. Now, we could also look at this from the opposite point of view. Maybe when the Great Ones call us into the nightmare, to a certain extent, they're also trying to understand us. They're trying to learn about us because, we're a curiosity to them. Just like, human beings try to study lower forms of life. We, sometimes rebuild their habitats for our own amusement. If you ever go to a zoo, what do you find? The monkeys are, an enclosure which looks like, their own natural habitat, like trees everywhere, whatever, so they can climb and, do their whatever monkey business. And if we, have you ever seen a little ant farm that's kids keep in their homes, which basically like a big glass box with a little enclosure, which basically looks a bit like a real ant hill. I mean, it could be that for the Great Ones, these realms are just an opportunity to toy and study human beings. For me, that makes perfect sense, considering the context of the game. As humans, we're never meant to fully understand or comprehend the motives of the Great Ones. They're just operating at a different level of thinking to us. And, as Willem said, we're thinking on a baser plane, so we'll never be able to understand them. That's an interesting thought. It might be complete rubbish, but I actually quite like it. I think it puts a nice little spin on proceedings, as it were. Not that this game needs it. I mean, for God's sake, there are dogs with crow heads and crows with dog heads in this game, for God's sake. I mean, what the hell is that? So, moving on to our host now, Micolash. He's probably the strangest and funniest guy in the whole game. His boss fight is it's not really the best. I think it's one of those one-note boss fights that's, like once you figure it out, it's not really that challenging, other than being cheap towards the end, but we can talk about that later. I want to talk about Micolash. So obviously, he was the leader of Mensis, and he came into the realm that they generated along with everyone else. But I think it's interesting because all the other members of Mensis seem to be dead. Now, the first thing you have to do in the boss fight is basically corner him. So he's going to go around the first square block. Now you have to basically chase him so that he stands in front of the open doorway. Once he's standing there, you need to go back round again, retrace your steps and go to the opposite end of that hallway, and then once you're there, just go straight at him and he'll basically be forced to move back into the area where you can corner him. Otherwise you'll just keep going around in circles again and again. Corner him. So he's going to go around the first square block. So he's also clearly gone mad as well. He when you meet him, he's rambling about Cos, because I think his dream of communing with Odin and Murgo is lost at this point. You never, he's not there with Murgo. He doesn't even mention him, which is interesting, because it's quite clear that, or at least to me, that he wanted, or at least tried to get an audience with Murgo and his father Odin, but he never managed to achieve it for whatever reason. It's interesting though, you'll find a lot of dead bodies around the arena where we fight the witness, so maybe all the other members of Mensis were fed to Murgo, or eaten by the or were eaten by the wet nurse. I don't know, but he himself seems to have survived, and now he's more concerned with Cos than with Odin. Why that is, I don't know. He clearly knows about Cos, but what that means, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. So the last part of the fight, basically, once you chase him down into this room, the only thing you have to worry about is the Call Beyond. That is it's always been quite a cheap weapon, and he uses it to full effect in this enclosed arena. you're relying on a certain amount of luck here. You can use your skill to dodge him to get out of the way, but it's quite difficult, and luck plays a role. I got a bit lucky in my last fight with him. He just didn't hit me at all with it, I don't think, at least not that I remember, and I basically just pounded the guy until submission. So that's pretty much it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If there's anything you want to talk about, comment and subscribe for more. Cheers, bye.